So, welcome back everyone to the Empowered Abroad podcast series sponsored by powered by Empower Education Consultants. So, as most of you know by now, this is a weekly podcast where we talk about the experiences of international students who have either graduated or current international students who've gone through either our consultancy or even generally gone abroad. The point of this podcast, like I say every week, is just for students to know about the international student experience and how it is to be abroad, study abroad, and deal with life abroad. So I hope this really helps students, and that's the entire aim of this podcast. So with that, this week we have Raed Altaf. He has taken out his time right now. He's currently in Dubai, so I would want Raed for you to introduce yourself. Can you please do so?
Sure thing. Thank you, Saim, for having me. So, as Saim said, I'm Raed. I was in Pakistan for the first 19 years of my life, went to Lyceum for my A levels, after which I went to University College London for my undergraduate degree in economics, spent 3 years in the UK, and after that, I worked for 1 year at PwC UK in consulting, after which I moved to Dubai, and right now I'm working in the same industry in the Middle Eastern market.
Okay, so yeah, Raid basically had gone through us back when he had applied for his university for UCL. So the first question I'm going to do to you, Raid, because you went to top tier university, right? A lot of people's dream option university in the UK is UCL. So how's your application process like for UK, and how did you end up landing in UCL?
So my experience was quite funny. I was mainly aiming for the US from day one. And I think it was around December when I realized that I was not going to get into the US with my SAT
Mhm.
score, because I was going on a application for full scholarship. After that, I sat down with Danish and I talked about my other options, and the UK came into the forefront. The application process with the help of Empower was quite streamlined. Danish took my entire life story, talked to me about the things I'd gone through, the interests I had, and how we could structure that into a really nice essay. And considering the UK is quite lenient when it comes to the application process relative to the US, it was just one essay that we had to do, and we put all of our effort into it. And that's how I ended up at UCL.
Mhm. So for those who of course don't know, what were your grades like in O level and A level, and what kind of grades do students need to be in a college like UCL apart from the personal statements and all of that?
So for UCL, the profile in those years was a bit more competitive compared to what it is right now after COVID. In those years, for economics at least, the requirement was for you to have two A stars in your A levels and one A in your A levels, and one of the A stars had to be in mathematics, which is a relatively tough subject to get an A star in. Then so that's what I ended up getting as well. My mathematics, apart from mathematics, I had an A star in economics and an A in English language. Before that, during my O levels, I had around nine A stars and one A. And apart from that, my personal statement for the UK, that was mostly centric around how my passion for economics stemmed from my extracurricular activities, which in those days was mostly Model UN. So I
Mhm.
used to participate in a lot of conferences. I used to learn about a lot about the economic field, how politics and economics intertwined, and being able to give a very international perspective as to what I thought economics was, in relationship with philosophy, in relationship with political sciences, in relationship with psychology. That really made my personal statement stand out. And that's most likely what got me into the university.
Okay, so you had quite good grades, right? You had double A star and A when you were doing your application for UCL at that time too. So would you say that it's key for students to have, in this day and age, with at least triple A to even be considered into UCL or King's College or LSC, or students with lesser grades can also have a chance if they have a good personal statement? What's your opinion about that?
So with the UK, I think when it comes to the top tier universities like UCL, LSE, and above, they're quite strict about their A level cutoffs. So let's say for economics, you have an A star A requirement, and you end up with an A star AA. In most cases, they will not consider you. But that being said, if you do end up in your A levels, in your AS levels, with let's say three A's or two A's, one B, or one A, two B's, that should not necessarily discourage you from applying. At least you can get a conditional offer into the university, and then it's up to you to make up that difference between what grades you have in your AS and what you have in your A levels, depending on how your breakup was in the AS levels and how much time you have to study.
So basically, you're saying that it's very key to have good grades and like competitive grades for you to even stand a chance, regardless of how your personal
Yeah.
statement is. It's just a realistic fact, right? For universities like
For
UCL.
the UK,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately for the UK, yeah. If you go UCL and above, then it's a fact. I think if you look at Kings, if you look at SOAS, if you look at Warwick, they're still somewhat lenient when it comes to
Mhm.
these things, but
Yeah.
At least when I went to UCL, it was quite strict.
Okay, the reason that this is very important is because there's a lot of students, and I mean, right, so everyone can dream, right? But who come to us at our consultancy and then say that, we have, for example, ABB and we want to apply to UCL, Kings, and above. And then, we just have to give them a reality check at times that it's great to have those kind of dream options and maybe even apply to one of those to kind of boost your confidence, but be realistic about the fact that they have cutoffs, right, every year. And those cutoffs are extremely high, like you said. So it's good to hear someone who graduated from UCL to, give that reality check to students. I want to move a bit towards your school and college life. Where did you graduate from in your O levels and A levels, and how did your A level time actually prepare you in terms of your A level exams, and then also, in any shape or form, did it help you to get into UCL?
So starting off with my O levels, I went to a relatively unknown school called Jaffa Public School,
Okay.
which was not all boys, as most people think it is for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, After that, I went to the Lyceum. The Lyceum, I spent 2 years over there. In terms of how that shaped me for my A-level exams and how it shaped me for university, the good thing about Lyceum is that they had a alumni base that was pretty strong when it comes to where they ended up in university. So my brother himself, he went to Lyceum and he ended up in the US. So, and then he had friends who could also attest to this fact. And because of that, you could see that the counselors knew what they were talking about to some extent.
Mhm.
They knew where students going to end up, how you need to prepare for that, etc. But we can talk about that later as well.
Right.
So that's one part, the counselors. Second thing, I think the community that you're in Lyceum makes a huge difference. So when I was applying for colleges, I remember there was this new school that was opening up at that time, which I will not name. And someone gave me the opportunity to actually go there and study there as well on a full scholarship.
Yeah.
And I straight up said no, because at that point, what mattered more was the community that I was going to be in.
Mhm.
And with schools like Lyceum, KGS, Nixer, Cedar, etc., you are surrounded by people who are very smart, who are very ambitious, and who want to achieve great things in life, and who are frankly privileged enough to achieve those things in life as well. So the things you learn from around your circles about where you should be applying for university, what extracurricular should be taking up, who should you be talking to, what degrees you should be looking into, that kind of transferred knowledge or knowledge spillover, it's very important in colleges like these. And I think that's what made Lyceum quite different in terms of the experience I had.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So you have an amazing job, right? Right after you graduate from UK, Alhamdulillah, you work in PwC. So I want to talk about your experience in regards to that and what led up to that. But before I delve into that, I want to stick to the part of you being in Lyceum. First of all, right, we all know what college you'd be referring to, and I mean anyone would be able to guess when you said that they offered you a scholarship. But I'll move past that. So when you were talking about Lyceum, I just want to ask you, right, because as a college student thriving for universities like UCL, what are the major challenges, which Pakistani students have when they're doing their university applications? Could you just, touch upon that a bit?
It's a good question. It's a good question. It's a long list, but I'm going to touch upon, I think, two or three points. First point I would say is that the community you're in, like I mentioned, it's great, but it can get overwhelming sometimes because you're around kids whose dads have been to Harvard, whose moms have been to Columbia,
Are you talking about like Lyceum?
and they no, not Lyceum, like KGS,
Oh,
etc. as
okay,
well,
okay, okay.
KAS, KGS, or you just have people who have extremely wealthy financial
Yeah,
backgrounds, so they can afford to go to Yale, Harvard on full
yeah,
payment.
yeah,
And that puts a pressure on you because you
yeah.
think, okay, they're able to do it. Why
Mhm.
can't I do it?
Yeah,
And at that point, when you're 17, 16, 18, you're
yeah.
not really well versed about the financial situation of your family in
Mhm.
some cases. So it's kind of hard to digest that fact, and the pressure really gets to you sometimes. So that's one thing I would say, that it's really easy to get swept up in peer pressure in the college application process. I knew a lot of my friends who applied to the UK, or even some places in the US because everyone was doing it around them. And they had this thing that, okay, at least if I get in, then I can think about it.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, what also happens is that people get swept up in the pressure of degrees. So you will see people often applying for law, economics, the usual like star degrees when it comes to the
Mhm.
Pakistani mindset.
Starter pack.
And that may not be for you, right? It may, yeah, exactly. Startup pack. It may not be for you. You might be great at history, you might be great at art, you might be great at AI,
Mhm.
but because you have that pressure, you end up making these mistakes. That's a big issue with the entire application process. People talk a lot, people mingle a lot with others. You hear about someone going to this consultancy firm or that consultancy firm, not paying that much or this much. And you think, okay, I need to be doing all of this, but you never pay attention to what you actually want. That's one major problem. You need to really pay attention to what suits you at that point in your
Yeah.
life, given the resources you have. The second thing I will say, which also relates to the community you're in, is the college counselors and how they help you out. The unfortunate reality is that although I did not face this experience much personally, I was quite blessed with the college counselor I had. Um, a lot of people face difficult college counselors in their school. And mostly not in terms of how they advise them, but the way they advise them. Our community is quite negative when it comes to things like ambition, right? So if someone says, "Oh, I want to go to Harvard, I want to go to Oxford," the instant response is, "तुम्हारा कैसे होगा वहाँ पे? क्या कर
Mm.
लेके तुमने?" Like things like
सही
that.
होता है यार.
And and I've seen that, right? I had a friend in Lyceum. She was extremely smart, extremely talented, and she wanted to, I think, apply for Oxford. And our counselor just said, "You can't get into Oxford," even though she had the grades, right?
Wow.
Similarly, yeah, I mean, I can quote a million examples like that. So that's the big issue. That counselors are quite discouraging in general, and you really need a thick skin in the whole process because you will get rejections. You will see your friends doing better than you. Sometimes you will feel that like, oh, I'm missing out. I'm not doing enough. So that's the second major issue, right? Like that people really need to thick skin. And the third issue that I think people face. This is mostly for individuals who are vying for that place in like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, etc., or in the UK, Oxford, Cambridge, is not understanding how competitive it is. Like it's just insane. When I was at UCL, even in my like course itself, I saw people who had done internship at places like Morgan Stanley when they were in grade 12. Because if you're in the UK, you have access to that, right? Or I saw people who had volunteered in Cambodia to help those shelters.
Wow.
My volunteer experience was that was super, like every other person.
Yeah, that's the same for
So
me. Same.
exactly. And so you're like, oh, damn, people have done a lot of stuff in their life.
Mm.
So you need to understand that, okay, you're up against these people when you're applying for these big places and big colleges. And you need to start building on your profile, working on your profile. If you have that dream from, I would say, the end of your O levels, like 2 years, just put your head down, get to work. Take the tough subjects, like take further maths if you can, if you have the mental capacity to do it. Take the tough sports, take the tough like ECAs in general. It will be a grind for 2 years. And you might miss out on some great aspects of college life, but
Yeah.
if you are dedicated to the idea that you want to go to Harvard or Columbia, etc., you gotta make the sacrifice, unfortunately.
So what you just talked about right now was basically peer pressure. That you see so many
Yeah.
people, and it's indirectly peer pressure because you see them excelling and you want to excel in the same pace, but you're not able to because
Exactly.
everyone is gifted different financially, right? Not everyone can afford to go to Cambodia and have an internship, and some
Yeah.
people can just afford to stay here and do the internship opportunities that they have. So that is a major problem, and I completely agree with you. But what solution would you give to that? Because there's a lot of people right now sitting in like Lyceum, Nix, or Cedar, right, in their A2s with that kind of experience, like us in Darul Sukoon, and they see
Hmm.
people who have all this international experience, given they have good
Hmm.
grades, but they would still be feeling nervous and pressurized at the fact that maybe I'm not good enough, like those people, to get into a university like UCL or maybe in America, Harvard.
Hmm.
So, what solution and advice would you give to those kind of students?
Reach out to your alumni, talk to a lot of them, and you will see one thing that people who went to LSE, people who went to like unis in Germany, France, etc., people who went to unis in Hong Kong, at the in like the next 5 years, in like the 5, 6 year, 7 year span that they have from the point they enter university to the point like 7 years later, they're gonna have very similar outcomes. Yes, they will be in different places in the world, and they will have different, job prospects and everything, but they will be in relatively similar places in life. And that gives you
Yeah,
some hope, right?
yeah,
That makes you realize that, okay, even if I don't get into Oxford, I can still do a pretty good job with my life, right? If
yeah,
I don't, if let's say, yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's the
yeah,
main concern you have, that you want to get a good job, you want to get that prestige. And fair enough. We all want that, but there's no one path to get
yeah.
there. When I graduated from UCL, like, and I worked at PwC for a bit, like, I would not say PwC was the best job you can get from UCL. There were some of my friends who went
Mhm.
to, let's say, subjectively, not the same university as I did, and got better jobs than me. So at the end of the day, it's not about where you go. It's about how you make do with the time you are at the place you want to be, or you
Mhm.
end up being. So talk to your alumni, get their experiences, learn what they did, and then you will have a sense of calm. And then follow the thing you should be doing, right? Like
Mhm.
based on the resources you have, based on the grades you have, and based on the time you have.
Yeah, and you said one thing earlier about, I think 5 minutes ago, regarding counselors, like school counselors, how they basically, some of them, not all of them, give you a sensation of, that you're hopeless, right? And if you have bad grades, then
Yeah.
you really can't do anything. And I think that, without trying to boost myself up, I'm a bit testament to that fact because right, Raed and I are completely different in that regard. Raed, alhamdulillah, had very good grades, right? Followed a better path, also with limited experience and, activities throughout his OA level, got into a good university with those grades and a remarkable personal statement. I, on the flip side, have a different story in that regard that I, throughout my OA levels, had extremely bad grades. In my O level, I had like B's and C's. In my A levels, I had D's and E's. And I'm sure there's so many students sitting there right now who have those grades, hearing this, and they're like, "Yaar, main to band kar deta hu. I'm not one of these students." But I'm one of those students, and I was one of those students. But there's a path for everyone, right? And that's why our motto is also, your future you decide, because it genuinely does mean that there is a future and outcome for every single person. I ended up doing foundation from Monash University. I've said this before on the podcast, and then after that went to Monash University, graduated with a 3.3 GPA, top 50 university in the world. After those D's and E's and C's in my A level, O level, so it's never a dead end, and it's just that how people in different stages test your capabilities, right? And at one of those stages, eventually, I'm sure that whoever's listening to this podcast, if you're a star student or a E grade student, in the right situation, you will excel. And I think that's the gist of what the Riot is also trying to say. You'll have hurdles. Pakistan with बहुत ही hurdles आएंगे, and it's a sad reality. This country is like this. The people in this country are like that also. That a lot of them are going to push you down. Your peers, some of your counselors, even maybe some of your teachers. Right? It's not for everyone, but this is generally the case. But you need to excel, keeping in mind all this kind of information which are giving you. So, with all that rant being said, Ryan, I want to now move towards USA. So, your initial applications for universities, like you said, was for USA. And over the years, I know you personally also, partially also because I was debating doing Model United Nations also around the same time when Ryan was doing it in Lyceum. I was doing it in Bayview. You mentored quite a lot of students, right, for US, either your juniors or then people you affiliated with in terms of application towards the US. So, can you briefly, tell the viewers or those aspiring to apply to US about how the application's like? Can you apply after O levels? That's a very important question. And thirdly, if you're applying after A levels, how do you need to go about it?
All right. So first question, how is it different? I'd say for the US, it's a lot more like I don't know, like a lot more like hurdles to cross,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
With the UK, it's just one application. You write one essay, and you can put your effort into that essay. You can make it the best essay in the world, and you're fine.
Mhm.
With the US, it's multiple essays. So you're writing like, let's say you've had 10 places, you have one common app essay, fair enough. But then you have the supplementary essays. For each university, there's one more essay. That's 11 essays now. But then each university will have something else as well. They'll be like, oh, answer this short question that's 100 words, and they'll have like 5 short questions to answer. So it's multiple essays you have to write,
Mhm.
and like the viewers might be thinking, oh, it's just writing. I can do writing, but like I said, it's very competitive. And what I've seen in the years that I've mentored people, what we don't understand is you need to write really good stuff and you need to be really well researched and you need to have a reason as to where you want to go and why you want to go there. If you're applying to even let's say Ohio Wesleyan College University and you don't have a justification as to why you want to go there specifically, you can get rejected quite easily. And that's happened to some people I know. Even though they have, let's say, I think it's 70-80% acceptance rate, I'm not sure. But yeah, you need to be very specific, very tailored in your application. And then also simultaneously, you need to prepare from, like I said, as soon as you enter your A levels, right? You need, even before that, even in your O levels, you need to start preparing for the US application process because you're looking at things like extracurriculars, like volunteering, like sports, like um, debating, etc. You need to show you're well read. You need to show like you have great grades. You're in the student council, and like I said, this is for top universities, but that's I guess where most people want to end up. So for the US, it's a process that starts really early on. You need to really learn how to write your essays from the get-go, and you need to learn how to research really well. So that makes it quite different from the UK. The UK is just, I would say, a brag profile about yourself. The US is multiple layers in the whole application process, which is why I would recommend if anyone wants to start the process, they should come quite early to a consultancy like Empower. The second step, can you apply after your O levels? Yes. Should you apply after your O levels? No. Going to the US at the age of 17, 18, um, I would not recommend doing it, especially if you haven't gone through your A levels, because frankly speaking, living alone internationally, meeting with people internationally, being in a new environment, like taking on responsibility, like washing your dishes, washing your clothes. I think that's most people don't do that in their households in Pakistan, given the cheap labor we have. But you have to learn to do that all yourself. You have to adjust to a new environment. You have to learn how to be alone. And frankly, I don't think that's possible or should be done, at least when you are in your O levels or
Mm.
right about to graduate from your O levels. Give yourself those 2 years in A levels, learn how to settle into new environments, because the fact is, the first time you're setting into a new environment is probably after your O levels when you go into your A levels. Last question being, after you apply for, or when you apply during your A levels, how's the process? Like I said, start as soon as you can, right? Start researching where you want to go, what states you want to go. The US is massive. A lot of people in the US don't have, like the citizens don't have passports because there's so much to see in the US that you don't even think about going outside the US. It's that big. So research the places you want to go, research things like costs, how much you want to pay, research what those colleges specialize in so you can start tailoring your profile accordingly. And honestly, yes, I would say if your school has a great college counseling unit, amazing. Talk to them in your AS. If it doesn't, get a counselor and talk to them as soon as you can.
Yeah.
That's I
So
think that's pretty much it.
thank you for that. So we're a bit short on time, right? So what we're going to do is I'm
Hmm.
going to jump to the last question, which is a very important question, and that is that you did about 3 to 4 internships, right? Before you ended up getting
Hmm.
a job in PwC throughout your time in UCL. So
Hmm.
how can a person wanting to go to a top tier university, actually in a top tier university in UK, get a job in UK? What's the key to that?
Do a lot of internships. Um,
Okay,
but
that's a,
I would also say, okay, so how do you get an internship? I think, yeah, the usual path is get an internship and then get a job, right?
yeah.
How do you get the internship? That's the first thing. With the UK, the thing is when you go and you have to get into extracurriculars from day one. So in the UK, it's weird. Like you have your first year and you have a bunch of societies. You have the investment banking society, you have the consulting society, you have the tech society, etc. Try getting into one of these, not as a spectator, but as a someone with a role of responsibility, right? So you have like first year representatives or executive roles, like something that gets you onto the
Hmm,
committee.
hmm,
You start learning how things are done and you start interacting with people who are senior and
hmm.
who've gotten internships so they can help you out.
Okay.
That's the first step. Similarly, in the first year, you'll see a lot of companies in the UK have these things called Spring Insight programs or Spring Weeks. 1 week introductions to the companies that you want to work in. That's a great way to step into the corporate world in the
Hmm,
UK.
hmm,
Even if you don't get into one of these, it's fine, because once you have that experience from your first year in a society, once you go to your second year, start applying to your internships and start from this first summer you're in the UK. Send out applications, tailor your applications as much as you can. Like I said, it's the same process as applying to the US, but in the job context. Research the firms, talk to people at the firms, actually have a reason why you want to work in that industry and why you want to work there. And in my case, I was lucky because my first internship, it was 6 weeks in July and June, and then I had another internship in the same year in August. So I got two internships simultaneous, like one after the other, which made things quite easier for me to get a job. Because once I had that experience, it was a stamp of approval basically on my CV that, okay, this guy knows how to work in the UK and he's worked in relatively bigger companies. Once you have that figured out, it's not that difficult to go into the whole job prospect because most likely you will convert from your internship to a full-time job. And if you don't, you will have your third year to write your applications and have at least a strong profile when applying to the jobs that you're going for.
hmm. So, okay, all those steps are very important, right? So basically, if I'm to sum it up, you're saying that you should have good PRing, you should be in touch with all the relevant employers of the industry where you want to apply, and at the same
Mhm.
time, do a lot of internships. After all that is done and you graduate, right? What is the first thing you should do when you do your job applications? When you hit that button to apply for the job, what should you do after that? Is there anything you should do, or just wait for the outcome?
In the UK, it's a bit different because networking does not generally get you that far, at least from what I've experienced. Yes, it can get you a referral, but that's it. Once you send the application, like prepare for your tests, I would
Okay,
say, or
okay.
start preparing for your interviews, right? And most important thing I will say is apply for your jobs during university.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
there are some companies in the UK. I remember I was interviewing one time for a role after I joined PwC, and I saw someone from their second year from Durham applying for that same job because that was the option they had. So you have companies that allow you to interview from your second year, not from your first year, most likely, but from your second year at least. So yeah, go for that, I guess.
That is amazing advice. And just before we do conclude, Raed is currently working, if I'm not mistaken, at Roland and Berger.
Weinberger, yeah.
Kronenberger, okay, which is a German company, but German multinational consulting company in Dubai. So he's doing quite well from himself. So you should really take advice and note on the fact that what he's saying is definitely a testament of his own experience, right? So thank you so much, right? We're going to conclude this podcast because of the limited time we had, but it was a very insightful podcast. We learned quite a lot, and I'm really hoping that the viewers learned quite a lot about the UK US experience, and most importantly, they learned about the challenges that I'm sure they can relate to also being students in Pakistan. But know that there's always a way forward, and you don't need to be hesitant to reach out to your counselors, and if they aren't of much help, then we're always over here, a call away uh, for you in regards to whatever option you need. We will always be there. So again, thank you so much, Raid, for your time,
Yep.
and
Happy to be here.
thank you so much. And for the viewers, we will see you next week on another episode of Empowered Abroad. Thank you, and Allah Hafiz.
Office.